wherever God is, all of God is. So if God is the first person in the present tense, I am, then wherever I am is, God is. The whole of God is. God does not exist outside of the experience that you are having right now. I hope somebody's getting this, man. I'm pointing you right at it. I hope you can see it. So as we've been saying here, God is the first person in the present tense, which means that God does not exist outside of the experience that you are having right now, or apart from, or separate from the experience you're having right now. God is never a second or a third person. God is never in the past or in the future. God is always right now, the I am, because God is the first person in the present tense, right? And so I, the feeling of I, the sense of being the subject you refer to as I is always how you know yourself, how you refer to yourself. And that feeling of I is even more intimate to you than even your first and last name are. You know, if someone asks you, what is your name? You'll tell them Aaron Abke, or whatever your first and last name is. But if we just ask, who is experiencing this? Who has this thought? Who has this feeling? It's always I, immediately. And so if God is the first person in the present tense, and you are always experiencing yourself as the first person in the present tense, then you are where God is. Pretty simple. Wherever God is, all of God is, right? Because there's no such thing as an absence of God anywhere. There is maybe the absence of awareness of God, but never an absence of God itself. So again, I want to emphasize that what we're going to talk about today is very intimate, and you shouldn't only listen to this message through the intellect, through the mind, but really try to take these words into your heart today. And your mind may be somewhat confused as we talk about kind of the deep things of God, the deep metaphysics of God's nature and God's being. The mind may feel a bit confused by some of the paradoxes, seeming apparent paradoxes, because the mind is always trapped in duality and filtering everything dualistically, right? Subject, object. But your heart already knows these words, and it rejoices to hear these words. It celebrates when it hears these words. And so if you listen to what I'm speaking here today through the ears of your heart, then you will feel this message deeply and easily within yourself. So he who has an ear to hear, let him listen. So if God is the first person in the present tense, I am, then wherever I am is, God is. The whole of God is. The totality of God is. And you can ask yourself these simple questions. Have you ever, or could you ever, have an experience without that I am consciousness or presence being there? And of course the answer is no, because you're always experiencing yourself as the first person in the present tense. You're always the subject of your experiences. So you never experience yourself as the second or third person, in other words. Always the first, always right now. There is only one I am in the universe, and its single eye is looking out through every living thing in the universe, because God is the only subject, God is the only consciousness, God is the only experience, because only God exists. And this is where the mind gets wrapped up a bit, right? In duality and separation. But God is very clear, even in the Old Testament, book of, I believe, Deuteronomy. Moses announces to the Israelites, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. and then in either the Psalms or Isaiah, I am the Lord thy God, there is none else beside me. There is none else beside me. So God is everywhere as the feeling or through the feeling I am, because every sentient thing in the universe knows itself as the subject, whether a rock, a tree, a leaf, an ant, an animal, a person, a higher density extraterrestrial, a planet, a planetary consciousness, a star, a solar consciousness, a galaxy. Everything is knowing itself through that I am-ness. Yeah? So God only experiences itself through individuality. And this is where we're going to get into the meat of today's conversation, that God only experiences itself through individuality, because in the allness of God, there is no separate experiencer who can experience God. There's just pure being, right? In God, there's just pure reality without an experiencer. So just like a knife can cut everything but itself, a scale can weigh anything except itself, or just like the sun can shine upon everything except itself, in the same way, God is everything, but cannot directly know itself without individualizing. So God must individualize in order to look at itself, and God is doing that through you right now. So in this context, can you begin to see or get a grasp or a feel for how holy you are? Course in Miracles says, my mind is part of God's. I am very holy. So this is what we've been teaching here. That God can only act through the mind of the individual. And so this is why we must practice awareness of the I am. We must practice loving the I am and consciously setting the I am into activity in our world through our mind, because you are the extension of the mind of God into the physical universe, right? You are the extension of God's mind into physical form. So there's no other point in the universe that God can be made manifest other than through you. Your mind is part of God's. You are very holy. So as a creation of God, a thought in God's mind through which God is knowing itself, that's where you find your true holiness, because God is whole. God is one. So God can't be divided in any way at all. So again, all of God, the whole of God, the totality of God is in you now, but it's located in the feeling I am, because God is the first person in the present tense. So all ideas of I am this and I am that, I'm this person, I'm this many years old, I grew up in this place, I went to this school, I don't like these things, I do like these things, I this, I that. That's what we call the I thought, or what Ramana Maharshi called the I thought. And that's that reflexive mechanism in the mind that always attaches your I feeling to forms, to objects. In 40 University curriculum, we call this the ego, the mental activity of identifying with form. That's what ego is. Ego is not an actual entity that exists, right? It's not an entity in your mind, like the little guy behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz or something. Ego is just an activity of the mind. And what is the activity of ego? What is that activity? It's the mental habit of identifying the I with forms. So we're just trying to learn this distinction between the I am feeling itself, the naked pure being, the Garden of Eden, and the I thought, which is the serpent in the garden that tries to convince us to eat from the tree of duality and claim to be something other than the pure I am. So if you can get this, if you can understand what I'm saying, this is where you can start to see the immensity of God's love for you. This is the access point to that infinite love of God that's available for you to draw upon and enjoy and bask in and soak in and experience at all hours of the day. It's through this understanding, right, that I am where God is. If I am, I must be where God is. God cannot be divided. God cannot be separate. There cannot be an absence of God anywhere. So here's what the mind does with God's love through the dualistic perception. It's like we tend to think that God's love, we hear in the Bible in Sunday school or whatever religion you grew up in or any holy text, we hear that God's love is infinite, God loves everyone equally. And the mind tends to think about God's love as being like equally spread out across the universe, right? So like God divided its love into little fractions and gave them to all equally, divided up its love equally to all beings in the universe. So it's like, yeah, God loves me, but like I'm just a little part in the universe. I'm just a grain of sand or something. So, I better not misbehave too much, or God might revoke that little percentage of love that God gave me. Right, Patty? We're the whole enchilada. Absolutely. So that's not what it is, right? It's not that you were given an equal portion of God's love. Wrong perception. Try again. The truth is that every being in the universe is or has God's love in its fullness, right? This is a metaphysical law that cannot be broken. Wherever God is, the whole of God is, because God cannot be divided in any way. So if God is experiencing itself as you right now, then all of God's love is in you now. As far as God is concerned, it's as though you're the only creation God ever made. Can you see that? Or as Jesus called it, the only begotten Son of God. It's as if all of God's love, it's not divided or spread out equally. It's that all of God's love in its totality is laser focused on you as God's only creation. Why? Because again, God never experiences two-ness or division or multiplicity in some way. All of God's creation is one, undivided, right? A singularity. So all of God's creation is you. I hope somebody's getting this, man. I'm pointing you right at it. I hope you can see it. All of God's creation is you, which means all of God's love, its entirety, is for you. You are the only begotten Son of God. Son of God means the creation of God, the extension of God. And this realization is what Jesus attempted to communicate by calling himself the Son of God. It was a dimension of awareness of self. I am the Son of God. Rather than just calling himself God, I'm God. Jesus was a little more clever and tuned in to the subtleties of these metaphysics, right? It may not be totally accurate for a person to say, I am God, because we use that ray of light coming from the sun analogy. A ray of light is the sun, but no one would say that the sun is a ray of light, meaning no person can exclusively claim to be God, but you can realize that you're God and that everything else is. So this is why Jesus called himself the Son of God, the expression of God, because Jesus knew as long as I'm embodied in this form, then the form is the expression, the creation, the mirror, the reflection God is looking at itself through. So I and my Father are one, and yet my Father is greater than I. Both are true, right? Jesus understood that because God was experiencing itself through the man Jesus, then Jesus contained the whole of God, because God's omnipresent. So there's nowhere that God is not. There's no opposite to omnipresence. Yeah? There's no opposite to omnipresence. So from this realization, Jesus could say, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. But at the same time, Jesus understood that my Father is greater than I. So in the awareness that the only God is I am, that God is the most intimate feeling we have about ourselves, the more we begin to know that, the more we experience ourselves to already be in heaven. I'm a perfect being in heaven here and now. It's one of the mantras that I like to repeat a lot here, because that is the awareness in the God state. I am a perfect being in heaven here and now. I am already the Christ. So as we get to know that part of ourself and identify with it, we begin to experience ourself already in eternity, not waiting for eternity after some kind of physical death occurs, but in eternity, in heaven, here and now. Being awake to our being as infinite, we experience supernal peace and blessedness and happiness always. Gradually, we begin to lose identification with the physical body, and we gain identification with our own I am presence. But we have to practice it, because if you're not practicing being the I am presence, then you are practicing being the ego, aren't you? Ego's always trying to insert itself into activity in your mind and claim who you are, identify you with forms. You're this body, you're this name, you're this person, you're that memory, you're that feeling, you're that thought. It's always doing that, and as you're giving into those ideas or letting them slip by, acquiescing, not taking them into captivity in your awareness and correcting them, then you are practicing being an ego, a separate self. So how else will you shift your identity away from the person, the form, the ego, and shift it towards the great I am? You practice it, just like anything else. So as we practice I am consciousness, the I am state, we notice certain things, like we lose fear of death. Fear of death just gradually kind of disappears without a trace from our experience. In fact, we may really look forward to physical death, because we know it's just a transition into the infinite. We know that there's no death, there's just transition from one dimension to the next. And so it's like, so what if my body gets destroyed today? I'll take up a new one again, because I am the eternal consciousness. I am the eternal conscious principle itself. I am. So I don't age, I don't die, I'm everlasting. That just becomes a childlike knowing for us. So you, as the I am presence, are God's only begotten Son. Do you see that? Do you see why that phraseology that Jesus used is very accurate? You are endowed with the fullness of God forever, and yet the physical expression that says I and the Father are one is just a mirror. It's not the totality, right? Just like one ray of light is not the totality of the sun, yet it possesses all of the sun's nature and likeness and radiance and form, right? So although the physical form is holy and sacred, the body, the person, it's a holy, sacred expression of the divine mind. Nevertheless, it is not to be identified with, because my Father is greater than I. The source is greater than its creation. The painter is greater than its painting. The musician is greater than its music. This is why Jesus said, I and the Father are one, but my Father is greater than I, because a ray of light coming from the sun says the same thing. I and the sun are one, and yet the sun is greater than I. So two things can be true, right? The image in the mirror, like your reflection gives you a perfect image of who you are. You get to fix your hair, brush your teeth, do all the things you use the mirror for. And yet the actual image that exists is greater than the reflection. Because the image, the actual self being reflected in the mirror, can walk out of the bathroom and go live and act in the world and has infinite potential. Whereas the mirror can only be the reflection of. So the image is always greater than the reflection. The reflection owes all of itself to the source that is reflecting it. That is like you, the person. So you are both the person and God. But no one would say God is just a person. God is far greater than just a person, but God is also a person. So again, there's the mind going to get twisted up in that a bit, but the heart goes, that's so yummy. That's a resonating message that my human form is divine and sacred and is to be loved, but I'm far greater than that. What the person is emanating from, what the ray of light is coming from is far greater. And that emanation is the I am in you. It is in this sense that we're one with God, right? And that God is fully present within us now. This is why Christianity has so deeply misunderstood Jesus' message, because they think Jesus was claiming exclusivity through these statements, because they don't have that awareness of the oneness and the omnipresence of God yet. So they can only hear Jesus' declarations through duality, exclusivity, right? But there's nothing else in all of existence other than God. So God can't be exclusively claimed by anyone, but the individual can realize its own source and creator. And that's all we're doing as we're stepping into the I am state. As we practice the I am, we are stepping into the awareness of our source, which we are, and we are the extension of at the same time. So a human is really God's expression, in the same way that a ray of light is the sun's expression. And so you are that ray of light, the only begotten Son. And there's so many beautiful passages in A Course in Miracles that talk about this, but I'm going to pull up Lesson 252, titled, "The Son of God is My Identity." It says, "Myself is holy, beyond all the thoughts of holiness of which I now conceive." So you're holier than you can even conceive of, you the mind, right? "Its shimmering and perfect purity is far more brilliant than is any light I have ever looked upon. Its love is limitless, with an intensity that holds all things within it, in the calm of quiet certainty." So there it is again, right? All of God's love is laser focused in you, on you, as if you're the only creation God ever made, the only begotten Son. Its love is limitless in you, with an intensity that is also holding all things within it. Everything that says I am in the universe contains that infinite love of God. Its strength comes not from burning impulses, which move the world, but from the boundless love of God Himself. How far beyond this world myself must be, and yet how near to me and close to God. Father, you know my true identity. Reveal it now to me who am your Son, that I may waken to the truth in you and know that heaven is restored to me. That's some good preaching, huh? Father, you know my true identity. Reveal it to me now, for I am your Son. I am your only begotten Son. So let's close with the embodiment piece of this. How do we integrate this teaching, this knowledge? And we do it in basically two ways, which we've been talking about every week here. The first way is we practice awareness of the I am. So as often as possible, practice lifting your consciousness to God's indwelling presence in you through your own I am feeling. Meditate on your being all day. See if you can isolate the feeling of I am, or the feeling that you exist, right? That you are, that existence is here, now, in me, as me, I am. Can you isolate that feeling and be, closed for business to any other thoughts? I'm this, I'm that, I'm a person, I have this task to do later. I'm this feeling, I'm this thought. Be closed for business to all those I thought salesmen coming into your mind. And just isolate, localize your attention on that presence of awareness. We call this practicing the presence. Highly recommend that book by St. Lawrence, I believe. Practicing the Presence is just a beautifully heart-opening book that St. Lawrence, who was a 17th century Catholic mystic, I believe, who this was his practice, and this was his one message to the world, was that if you practice lifting your consciousness, your awareness to God's love, to God's presence, which is here now, you become that presence. Because whatever you give your attention to, you merge with, you become. Whatever you love, whatever you give your heart and devotion to, you become like it. So, awareness of I am, practicing the presence of I am, actually feeling it happening within you. That's the first practice, that there is no barrier to entry. There is no hindrance to this practice, right? You can practice this all day long. While you're out and about doing anything in ordinary life, nothing gets in the way of you putting your attention on the I am. Because the I am is all intelligence and all power. So as you place your attention on I am, you can still drive your car with perfect accuracy. You can still answer phone calls, respond to emails, be in the world, have conversations, navigate. The I am is the intelligence by which you know where you're going, by which you remember what to do today. The I am is the intelligence by which you speak these words to others, by which you remember how to speak words. The I am is the all-being, the all-doer in you. So can you just be aware of the I am activity? That's number one. And of course, we've been hammering that, haven't we? But then the other piece we've been hammering is the counterpart to that practice, which is eschew and ignore all the wrong ideas of who you're not. Ignore the I thoughts, as Ramana Maharshi would say. Ignore when the mind tries to project your I am feeling onto a body, or this false sense of continuity of being an individual person living in a world. You are experiencing an individual person in the dream world, but you are also beyond it and eternal and infinite. So you should never limit your identity down to the person. You should include the person in your total identity as the infinite. See the difference there? Not a small difference. Not a small difference. Include the person. We're not saying, oh, the person's bad, the body's bad, it's wrong, it's to be negated. That's not quite the highest teaching here, the highest truth. Maybe that's useful for people at a certain stage. Ignore the body, pretend it doesn't exist, it's all just Maya. But at the highest state of God consciousness, at the singularity level of SQ, it's that the person is God. The person is also God, as the birds, as the trees, as the grass, as the sky, as everything is God, so is the person. So the person is included in the infinite, it's just not limited. We're not limiting ourselves to the person any longer. So ignore all thoughts of I am this, I am that. Ignore that reflexive mechanism of the mind, which tries to grab hold of your I am feeling and attach it to forms and feelings and opinions and all that stuff. I am this, I am that. Remain only as the awareness of I am, pure being, pure existence. And I'm telling you, this light that shines in you as I am, it begins to grow and radiate wider and wider within the center of your chest. And it's as if it begins to extend itself out into your energy field and into your world. And you start feeling almost like you're just floating in this beautiful awareness of being, this inner stillness of, oh, everything's just God. It's just God here. What else could there be? And the beauty that reveals itself to you, the devastating bliss that begins to encounter you, when you begin to condense this realization into the heart that I am the subject of all experience. Wow, everything's appearing to I am very holy. That revelation will dawn in your mind, in your awareness, as you practice lift your consciousness to that awareness as much as possible, especially when you feel negative in your state of being, especially when a troubling feeling happens. Take all your attention away from it for a moment and shine it forward into the I am. And as you do that, the things of earth grow strangely dim, as the old hymn says, in the light of his love and his glory that's just radiating inside of you through I am. All of God's love localized within you. The infinite capacity of God's love in you. So just be the presence that you are, right? Aren't you always present wherever you are? If I am present, then I am presence. I am presence. We must practice noticing this habit to identify and just relinquish it easily, quickly. Oh, not true. An illusion of the mind. I'm not a person or a body. The person and the body is included in what I am, but the sun is not an individual ray of light. The sun is all light, and so is I am. Practice letting go of those I thoughts throughout your day and hold fast only to the presence of that pure, immaculate I am itself. Be closed for business to the mind, to any other idea of who you are. And again, meditate upon your own pure being. Get intimate with that sense that you exist, that you are the eternal subject, and love it. Love it as the fullness of who God is and who you are, the only begotten Son. That is who I am. Just as a child knows that its father or mother loves it with all of their heart, it doesn't even know how to question its parents' love, right? From the moment that a baby is born and raised by loving parents, the baby has never even known anything other than the unconditional love of its mother and father. So it doesn't even know the opposite to it. It doesn't know rejection or separation from its mother and father's love. Not until a certain age, when the ego starts taking over. So this is why Jesus said, if you want to enter the kingdom of heaven, which is already at hand and within you, you got to become again as a little babe, a little child, or you must be born again, Jesus said. Born again in what? Born all over again into the awareness of your Father's love, into the awareness of I am. And because I am where God is. Right now, right where you are, is where God is. But are you aware of it? And you might say, no, Aaron, honestly, I'm not. No problem. No problem. You are an infinite creator with infinite capacity to create. So all you need to do is start practicing being aware of it. Because again, there's a lot of things happening in your environment that you're not aware of. There's frequencies happening in your environment you're totally oblivious to. Sometimes we can be holding our own phone in our hand, be looking for our phone. Where's my phone? Where did I leave it? And it's in your freaking hand the whole time because your awareness left it so intensely to look out externally, you forgot what you're holding on to, or your car keys or something. It's like we're doing that always with the I am. We're always looking out as I this, I that. And then we're like, where am I? I feel separate. I feel alone. There's no love. Because you're looking out, right? Rather than turning within. So let's turn within for a few moments. In Christianity, we used to call this soaking, or you could call it practicing the presence, soaking in the presence. And that is just to, sit, whether in meditation or anywhere you are, and lift your consciousness to the awareness of God in you, God's presence here now as the I am feeling. The first person in the present tense is God. Fix all your attention on it and just bask in the glory, the radiation, the sublime peace and tranquility, the overwhelming love. Can you just place your awareness on that? And then just let it rest there. And as you meditate on that feeling, you may notice the mind coming in, attempting to take your attention off of it onto other things. And so that's where you practice step number 2, ignoring, turning your attention away from all thoughts of anything other than I am. Infinite, glorious, all-loving presence, I am. We give you our thanks and our praise for shining in us always. We acknowledge your ceaseless manifestation. We are aware of your omnipresent activity, pervading all, everywhere. And we feel your mighty peace, your everlasting love, your omnipotence, and your omnipresence in us now. Now. I know and affirm that there is no other place where God's presence is, apart from where I am. We know and we affirm that the Son of God, the Christ, is my true identity. So I am very holy. And so now we turn for a few quiet moments to that infinite light, that infinite presence, I am. And there we encounter the unconditional, irrevocable, and eternal love of God. And if the mind tries to pull your attention away to any thought, you can bring it back by affirming, I feel the love of God within me now. And to our great I Am presence, we give thanks and praise, knowing that you anchor us into this awareness, always. And that you are doing your great and mighty work within us now to embody this awareness and to be this awareness in our own world, so that this marvelous light of eternal life may fill all beings that we encounter. Take a deep breath into that intention, and a deep breath out. 2 more deep breaths. Breathing in, breathing out. 1 last time. Breathing in, breathing out. And so it is.